I want to just break up once with COVID.
Yeah, like let's not like slip back into like one night thing, you know? No.
Let's get to work.
Okay, thanks for doing this.
Thank you for joining me. I'm glad that we're able to spend some time and talk about what's going on for you. So you have 3 jobs. You write for the Globe and Mail, you write for Opera Canada, and you're the editor for Schmopera.
That's right, yeah. I write about opera primarily and classical music by extension. You know, you want to do like a preview item for something upcoming. There's nothing upcoming. You want to feature an artist because they're releasing an album or they've got a new show, or there's nothing. In the real practical sense, that means no reviews. The pace slows right down. And so as someone who's responsible for putting out content very regularly, it gets a little bit of a worse nightmare when they start doing the staggered opening, that the performing arts will not really be at the top of the list. I think it's essential, but it's not essential.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. In one of your posts recently on Schmopera, you were humbled by the fact that something you were so in love with may be deemed by the general public as something so insignificant.
Yeah, essentially. Opera is not essential for most people alive on the planet, but it's one of many niche passions that people have. There's a fan base for it, and it is something that I really love, and it sort of marks my life. Like I like knowing what the next thing I'm going to see is. I like the act of going and writing about it and thinking about it, and it's very exciting. Even if it's a terrible show, it's still fun. It's lovely and fulfilling, but like if this is my kind of reference point for normalcy, like maybe it's good to check that.
What do you think the future of opera is?
The idea of curating opera that's actually meant to be consumed primarily from your couch, as opposed to like broadcasting a live show, which has benefits, but it's 2 audiences. The idea of virtual reality opera, I mean, there are like holograms of like Maria Callas that goes on tour now. It's weird, but she sells out houses. But there is something about just like that crazy sound smacking you. That's not going to translate well. There's nothing quite like hearing an impressive voice in the same room as you. It's not impossible to be moved by something that's not live, but it's definitely hard to replace. It's my most thrilling form of opera. So I'm going to mourn that until I can see that again, you know?
At least for me, I'm experiencing it simultaneously. You know, or if I'm the singer, I get to bring them along with me. There's a excitement and a thrill in that.
Well, and it's always exciting to see when it's imperfect too, because then you're almost more impressed. I don't think very many people are actually practiced at making a mistake in front of an audience and just moving on with their lives. It's one of those things that you can learn from performers.
You know, I think opera has a reputation not being particularly inclusive to those who are not familiar with it, because it is a high art form. If the audience were able to see the realness and just the human component to who these singers actually are, that may go a long way to bridging that gap.
Yeah, I agree. The great example is that Met Gala that just happened. 40 plus singers, they're stage people and they're not on the stage right now. So not everyone is going to be at 100%. And it's kind of endearing for me to see that. I would freeze too if I knew that my boss at the Met was watching me sing a cappella in front of my bookcase. Well, I remember asking Sandra Radvanovsky, a major opera singer, about this, because she did one of the first Met broadcasts when they started doing it in the movies. Like she had studied film acting, and so she knew sort of the differences in acting for stage and camera. I'm oversimplifying it, but basically like big facial expressions and not as big facial expressions, like for the camera. And so she told me that she made the mistake, she called it a mistake, to do the broadcast performance for the cameras. She walked off stage and she said, I gave nothing to the live audience. She's like, you cannot do these things for those 2 audiences at the same time. I mean, even if you could stage an opera that would keep everyone 6 feet apart, like what do you do about the audience and the orchestra, the tiny hallways of backstages? Artists and anyone who has like a crazy passion for their job, it becomes linked with your identity. When you can't do that anymore, it's really unmooring. You don't know who you are. You don't know how to organize your days. It's like it is a loss. Like I know a lot of singers that literally pursue it for the physical pleasure of making sound, because it can be quite lovely to make a sound like that. That's a fine reason to do anything, especially if you're paying your bills with it under normal circumstances. And so when that stops, but you have this crazy identity crisis. I'm like, I have no idea how to present myself now. And in some ways you almost feel silly because a normal person would pursue a job where you don't have to pay so much to get paid so little. You and I know this, like the life can wreck your life. Like you can get divorced over your job. You can not see your kids grow up over your job. And so when the job goes away, you're just like, what did I do?
Music is part of the healing process in this pandemic. If you can see it with what you were mentioning with the Met, with the Canadian strong performances, people singing on their balconies, the Italians singing in their neighborhoods. Music and performance, in my opinion, is essential. What are we doing when we really need to find hope and community? We go to art.
Well, and it's almost how we remember it too. A lot of us learn about it through fiction or movies or songs. It's a way of recording all this kind of stuff.
I look forward to just being in the same room and being a part of the thrill.
We're not going to see the same amount of government help for one, because the funds will be brightly tied up. This is the case for opera and classical music, is it's sort of one third government money, one third individual donations or corporate donations, and then a third of ticket revenue. So those first 2/3 are quite precarious right now. And the ticket revenue is completely dependent on whether it's healthy to go out. In opera particularly, we have to consider that the audience averages an older age. And so those people might be even more wary to go out again. Honestly, I don't even like grand opera, but like I like grand opera. I like showing up. I like dressing up, mingling, saying hi to everyone, squeezing into this little seat. There's something glamorous and nostalgic about it because I grew up doing it. People want to see live music. Like they just pile into bars and stadiums and comedy clubs and cabarets, and there's just shoulder to shoulder. It's almost inconceivable now. The podcast is called the Everything Will Be Okay podcast. This podcast is a series of interviews, but it's not just singers. It is opera people right now, but I'm hoping to slowly expand out into just the arts as a broader thing, talking with people who should know best what will happen in the arts industry after COVID or during COVID. A couple of the guests, Barbara Hannigan, Bramwell Tovey. Yeah, I liked the idea of talking to optimists and people that seem to thrive under difficult circumstances with their careers anyway, and ask them if everything will be okay. So far, the consensus is good. Artists are quite resilient and they're quite optimistic, I find. The real successful ones keep on going when it gets tough out there. But it was interesting to talk about some of the nuts and bolts about what happens when an arts company has to deal with, mass closures, and what individual artists have to do with their calendars and with their stuff.
Or what do you hope we learn as artists?
I think artists are generally kind to each other. I think that will be exaggerated.
What's the first thing you're going to do when you get out of COVID?
I'm going to go to my local Dark Horse coffee and get an iced latte, and then take Alex to the silly fountains at the park and let him run around with other children. Yeah. What about you?
I want to go for brunch.
Totally.
It's a pleasure to talk to you.
You too. Hang in there.
Yeah, you hang in there too. You got this. The red looks good on you.
All right. See ya.
Bye.